that I got here late. I was in an East Midlands train. Cost £87, was half an hour late, and in the last year alone, you know, the massive influx of money has gone to the CEOs and chief executives, and there's been very little investment in the infrastructure. So yeah, as I said, I mean, it's incredibly humbling hearing you talk, and you know, what you do is, I just make jokes at politicians' expenses. I'm a satirist, so obviously my job is basically redundant currently. Some weird TEFL bearded geography teacher who's now the leader of the Labour Party. We've got a Prime Minister who apparently has sex with pigs' heads. You know, it's quite difficult to really know what to joke about. It's sort of all kind of beyond belief, and it sort of goes to show. I mean, Natalie and I were at a People's Assembly about a year ago, and a lot has happened in a year. You know, a year in politics is a very long time, and 5 years in politics is almost a lifetime. I certainly won't be trying to take on actually what's going on for a couple of years, because honestly I have absolutely no idea, and I consider myself to be relatively well informed. So I know that this is a meeting about the importance of this protest that's coming up, and I agree that making our voices heard is really important. But I also think winning arguments, making reasoned and logical suggestions that a broad number of the electorate can get behind is equally, if not more important currently. At the minute, 6.5 million people, that's a quarter of the population, are basically living on poverty pay. And despite the living wage and with it taking into account all the benefit cuts, that figure isn't changing anytime soon. What we have, I believe, is not democracy at all. I believe we live in corpocracy, and I believe that we need to educate people as to what that is. You see, I think we live in a financial system. I think that most of you here worry about paying your rent, paying your mortgage, paying your phone bills, paying your tuition fees, being able to go on holiday, and we don't talk about it. We don't relate to each other about these things because it's private. It affects our social status with each other. It affects the way we view each other as a success or a failure. And it's a tumour right at the heart of our democracy. This is a fundamental issue about the nature of what we want to achieve as a social movement. Because bringing attention to specific issues like this is how we're going to enliven the debate and take the debate away from the Tory graph, the Evening Standard, the Times, and the current gatekeepers, who are the current gatekeepers. I think we should be under no illusions about that. And take it into our own terms by changing the narrative. Now, I think that what we've kind of got at the moment is a case of amazing rebranding and stealing of ideas. I mean, like, politics is the only place where you can kind of steal the kid's homework who's like next to you and then sell it off as your own to the applause of your own party. In, you know, my business, that's called plagiarism, and you know, you get sued really heavily. You know, the living wage is supposed to be calculated on things like how much housing costs, transportation costs, the price of food, but it's not being calculated like that. And let's be under no illusions that they have, the Tories, stolen a huge march on. The popular movement that I believe that, you know, Sam has done so much to enliven from the grassroots. I'm not Jeremy Corbyn's biggest fan. I think he is an important person who a huge sway that social movement has connected to, in the same way that Pablo Iglesias in Spain with Podemos, or the movement that now is Syriza, and Tapas. That's exactly what happened in those countries. They're not the answer. They're just a symptom, because essentially the cause is this gigantic social unrest that we all feel in our bones and don't really have an ability to translate. I look at here and there's a real mix of people, a lot of young faces, and I see that more and more. And it's nice because I remember a time where that really wasn't the case, and it's actually about younger, more energized voices coming to the fore and taking the opportunity, and that this groundwork is that Corbyn's really doing, is kind of creating for us. So today, I mean, the actual speech that was given today was amazing. We were talking about our relationship with Saudi Arabia and how can we be supporting a country that, beheads 191 people in 6 months whilst fighting ISIL. It's the glaring hypocrisies that I think a lot of us have felt for a long time. However, I'm a big believer in knowing thy enemy. So on the way up, I was reading the Telegraph, and there are some fantastic pictures in here that you should see. So we've got Robin Hood as Jeremy Corbyn, obviously, strong look. John McDonnell, who's turned into some weird, sort of bastardised version of, Bart's Homer Simpson or whatever meets, I don't even know what that is. And some really racist photos, Diane Abbott as the Queen. But they make some very good and salient points, and it should be remembered, because over 9.3 million people voted for the Labour Party in the last election, and only 250,000 people took part in an incredibly interesting democratic process that became the Labour leadership election. But they've started to use the messaging of the 150,000, the new members, the people that voted for Corbyn, as if they have a new way to contextualise what they're considering to be radical, hard left agendas. Now, personally, I actually don't think these things are particularly radical. I think they're really common sense. But we need to win that argument, and the way that we win that argument is by articulating the nature of these new policies and how they would affect you, your neighbour, and the guy that reads The Sun next to you at work, who has no interest generally in talking anything other than the football scores. I mean, we all know these people, and I think that what we have the opportunity to do is to explain some basic principles, like the fact that we live in a system where we've had the complete privatisation of profit and the socialisation of risk. That our economy is now basically in the interests, and our democracy being run for, the people who pay for it. The private equity firms and the hedge funds that fund the Tory party. Because I don't think that these things are really very well understood. And England is a conservative country generally. And it's important to remember that we've got the opportunity now, because we now have one party that believe in a neoliberal reality and doing everything as it's been done, and an alternative, a genuine party of opposition, along with Natalie's party, along with Clyde Cymru, along with the SNP, who I hope very, very much will form a strategic anti-austerity alliance to actually take them on and be able to vote against them in greater numbers. Because I think that we're reaching a real crux now in terms of the choices that we make as a society about what values we pass on and we look toward the future with. I think another financial crisis is in there. If you look at what's going on in China with the devaluations of businesses to the point where a third has been just wiped off their value, and then you look today at the realities of the commodity market where Glencore, who are a huge commodity trader, is realising that we are so unstable now that they can't just sell off the futures of corn, of oil. in the ways that they have been, all the signs are there. And like Natalie said, we're in a very, very vulnerable position. Because what quantitative easing has done is it has inflated the prices of assets and made some people incredibly rich. But for us, for the people of this country, we're much, much worse off. It's a very well-trodden line that we've had experienced the biggest fall in living standards since records began in the 1870s. So when people start talking about quantitative easing for the people and actually releasing money so that small business owners, like the people Natalie was talking about earlier, who actually were trying to work towards green technologies that were sustainable, actually, and contributing towards a more kind of equal society, I suppose, those are exactly the sort of people we should be helping. For me, today was a really interesting day because I think I, like many people, was watching Corbyn's speech and thinking, and I consider myself a pretty hopeful guy, I can't believe that the leader of the Labour Party is saying things he is. It's a unique moment. And I love the fact he's fucking gate crashing the party on Sunday. He's got a real attitude about him. But it's his blessing and his curse. The majority of people in this country will buy the narrative that the Telegraph gives them, at least for the next year. But I think within the next 5 years, there will be a crash. And I think at that point, the whole system will be re-evaluated. Anyone who's as old as me or older will remember that it took 1 day for Michael Heseltine to lose the complete faith of everyone in this country over the Tories' ideas of being, wonderful custodians of the economy. So let's be centred. Let's meditate on what we can do to share these experiences. Let's not be too provocative in our ideas of how everything's just changing overnight, because only 150,000 people actually voted Corbyn in.
250,000.
250,000 people voted him in. I'm sorry, you're right. But, with respect to 9.3 million people voting Labour, it's a fraction. But what we have is an opportunity that Sam and people who have been at the foundation of the People's Assembly have given us, to start a grassroots movement, to actually start looking at some of the issues that affect the broken social contract that we have, and really take them on, own them, and transform them into a society that we actually want. Thank you.